Hey guys, it's Rogaway here and I'm back with another tutorial. And today we are looking at the basics of CSS, which really is an amazing thing. If you are in web design, you're going to be able to make your websites look a heck of a lot better using these techniques. And we're going to get started with a folder I have of images based on Stranger Things. Alright, so we have a background image, we have a screenshot from the show, we got the logo, and we have a basic index HTML. It's just really simple. Let's open that up. We'll use Komodo, and we're going to drag it to Komodo. And you'll see inside here, I got nothing fancy going on. It's really, really basic HTML. And it looks pretty bad. If I go to preview it, I'm going to hit the preview. Oops. And you know what? I'll leave it up at top. That's fine. That's okay. Alright, so I got my preview up top and I got my code down at the bottom. And like I said, you can see that it's pretty basic. There's nothing happening here. But we're going to use CSS to make this look a heck of a lot better. Alright? So you'll see that I already have a CSS file in there. It's called style.css. This is the standard name for a CSS file for a website. I'm going to drag that to Komodo as well. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to put it next to the index. Okay, so the index and the CSS are sitting next to each other. Alright, so like I said, pretty basic looking page so far. Now, the very first step in order for this to work, in order for the CSS file to tell our HTML file what to do, is that we have to link it. So in our header of our title, the header of our HTML file, we're going to put link rel, which stands for relationship, equals style sheet. Because that's basically what, oops, I spelled that wrong. Style sheet, because that's what a CSS file is doing. Type equals text CSS. We're telling it that the type of file is a CSS file. And href, or hyperlink reference, equals style.css, which is the name of the file that we have in that folder. Okay, so this creates a connection to that file, even though there's nothing in there yet. It's blank. As we start to add things, we'll see it affect our HTML file. Okay, because now it's linked up. So let's save that. Command S. Good. We don't see anything change because we don't have anything in our CSS file. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go jump over to our CSS file. In CSS, it's a little different than HTML because it doesn't use the greater than, less than brackets. It uses parentheses instead. So I'm going to show you the first command with CSS, and that is star, or asterisk, which you can find above the 8 on your keyboard. So we're going to put star, and we're going to put parentheses to start. See how when I add one, it automatically adds the other one? Okay. Star means that whatever we put in between these two parentheses is going to affect everything on this HTML page. Star is for everything. And I'll show you what that means in a second. So for example, you'll notice that HTML is using a really boring, sort of basic font. Let's say we wanted it to use something like Helvetica or Arial instead of the default Times New Roman. Well, then what we could do is we could say, for the entire page, because we're inside star here, font family, Helvetica, comma, Arial. And in CSS, it's very important you put your descriptor, then you put a colon, you put what you want it to do, and then always at the end you have to put a semicolon. When I save that, Command S, we won't see anything change here because it didn't actually affect the HTML file. But if we refresh here at the top, you will now see that the font has changed to either Helvetica or Arial, depending on if we're on a Mac or a PC. Alright, so we always have to hit the refresh in Komodo, and then it'll show up. Okay, so you can see in one command, we changed that text to something entirely different. Alright, so now, again, that's going to save us lots of time, because in the past, we would have to put tags for everywhere that we want it to change. In here, we could just put it in once. Font size, let's say all the fonts on this page are going to be 15 pixels. Now, the cool thing is with CSS that we can go really, really huge or really, really small. Not like with HTML where we only have the 1 to 6. So 15, and we'll refresh. You'll notice that everything shrinks down to 15 pixels. Let's say we wanted the text to be centered. Alright, in HTML we would use a center tag. And we'd have to use a center tag every time we wanted that in there. In here we could just put text align, center. And you'll see that it's always giving you suggestions of what you can put besides that. So center. And if I save that and refresh it, now all the text, and actually the pictures as well, go to the middle. Okay, so everything got centered there. Alright, so you can see how this is pretty effective. It will allow us to make big changes to our page without directly, being put into our HTML file. So let's do a few other things. Let's say we wanted a background image inside here. Alright, and we want to fill up the entire background. In the past, with HTML, if you use a background tag inside of your body, it's pretty limited as to what you can do with it. It just kind of plunks it in the background. So what we're going to do here is now we are going to target a specific part of our HTML document. We're going to put HTML, which you will see if we switch back to HTML is right here. So we're basically targeting the entire document. We could have put this in star, I suppose. We're also going to put comma body. Oops. We're also affecting the body part of our HTML. So we're affecting the entire, basically the entire page. And we want to tell it that our page should use 100% of the width and 100% of the height. Okay, so we're basically telling it fit the entire browser window. Okay, and I'll just refresh. It'll just move a tiny little bit because what it did is it pushed things over a little bit. You see that the text now goes basically right out of the edge of the page because it's completely 100% fitting that page. Okay? So now let's say we want to do a background image. And you'll notice in our folder we got a file called background.jpg. There it is. We know from HTML that a background image is a component of the body tag. Alright, normally we put body background equals whatever the name of the image is. In CSS it's a little different. We're going to put body, okay, because we want this to affect just the body tag. And we're going to put background image URL, okay, brackets, background, quotations, .jpg. All right, like that. So background image, URL, or basically file name, is background.jpg. And if we save that and refresh, it now puts that in the background. Now you notice now that the text is really hard to read. Can't see it, so let's go here to the star, which is everything on the page, and we're going to say color white. It's as simple as that. And when we refresh, now our text is white. Okay? Well, let's say we want this background to fit a little better. We can do a few things here. We can put background size is cover. Means it's going to cover the entire background. Save that. Okay, you'll see now that it has fixed the size of the background so it fits the width of the page. It covers the whole page no matter what size it is. We could also say the background attachment is fixed, which means that when we scroll up and down, it's going to stay in position. You don't have to have that, but it looks pretty cool. I'll save that, refresh. Now watch, when I scroll this page, the background is now locked, so it doesn't move. We can keep it locked in position so that that stays fixed all the time. And as a last thing, we could do something like maybe background position. Oops, position is centered, so that we make sure that it's always going to be locked to the center of the page as well. All right, so there we go. Okay, now you can see we can do a lot of adjustments, whereas before with HTML we could only say background equals whatever and it just threw it in there. All right, it didn't look very good, it just threw it in. Now we have complete control over our elements. But let's say we want to make our text look a little bit better, all right, because it's pretty hard to read. If we look in our HTML file, you'll notice that we have two different types of text in here. We have a header 1 and we have a paragraph, okay, or a P tag, paragraph tag. So the title, What Awaits in Season 3, is a header, and all the rest of the text is a paragraph. We can affect each part of the HTML document separately because they are separated by different tags. All we have to do is target the specific part of the HTML that we want to affect. So here we can put P. Actually, let's do the header first. We'll put H1. So what we're putting into our CSS here will only affect H1, which is what awaits in Season 3. So for example, let's maybe make that font size bigger. We'll put it to 30 pixels. We'll save that. Okay, so you see how that affected just H1, made it bigger. It didn't affect the rest because it's only focusing on the H1 tag. We got the color white, that's good. It's centered. And we'll leave it. We just made the title a little bit bigger. Now let's say we now want to affect the paragraph part of the page. So we would go and affect the P tag. Let's say we wanted some more space on the sides. We don't want it to go pushed right to the edge because that looks kind of bad. So what we can do is something like margin, and we can set where we want the margin to affect the text. So let's say we want it just on the left side. Margin left, let's say 70 pixels. And if I save that, we see we now have this 70 pixel block of space on the side. And if we do the same thing, margin right, 70 pixels, and we save it, we now have 70 pixels on the right. So you see how we can make it look a lot better. Okay, it's starting to come together. Now, perhaps this text is really hard to read, and it is. I find this really tough to read. Maybe we want to add a shadow to the text, something that we could never do with HTML before. What we could do in here is we could say text shadow. Now this one is a little tricky to understand what it's doing. Okay, I'll explain. We're going to put 0 pixels, and this is how much the shadow will be offset horizontally. 0 pixels, how much the shadow will be offset vertically. Let's say 10, maybe that's too much. Let's say 5 pixels. This is the amount of shadow we're going to have. And then the color of the shadow. So we're going to put black. And if I save that and I refresh it, you'll see that we now have a shadow under the text. All right, it's pretty minor, it's pretty slight, but you can still see it there. Let's say we go to maybe like 2 instead. We save that. It's hard to see. But I want to just explain how these tags work, because there's a lot of tags like this. If we wanted to move the text over, let's say I affect just the first part of this. I put a 5 there. You'll see that the shadow has moved over 5 pixels. And if we want to move it down 5 pixels, we can put a 5 there and save it. And now you can see that the shadow has moved down 5 pixels. So what these numbers are doing is moving the shadow wherever we want it. So we have complete control over the shadow. We're going to put 0 and 0 again so that the shadow is directly behind it. I think that looks good. I'm going to just take this, select it, copy it, and paste it into the H1 because I want the header to have that same sort of effect. There we go. Super easy. All right, so the page is really coming together nice. It's starting to look good. Now let's say we want to do something fancy with our picture. Okay, let's say we wanted to give, maybe we want to give this picture rounded corners or something. And there's a lot we can do with CSS, but I'll just show you a few things. It's going to be impossible for me to show you everything. But let's say we want to affect this image. We're going to put the image tag. All right, because in our HTML, that screenshot is inside of the image tag. And let's say we want to give it round corners. So what we could do is we could put border radius, okay, 50 pixels, let's say. And if I save that and we look at that, there we go. You can now see that that has rounded those corners off really nicely. And whatever we put in here, the higher the number, let's say 100 or whatever, it's going to round it more. All right, so I'll just leave it at 50. That's too much. Save. There we go. Okay. Let's say we wanted to add a little border to this picture. Okay, so we could put border. First, we're going to tell it how big of a border. So I'm going to say 5 pixels. And then we're going to tell it what kind of a border. We're going to say solid. Okay, you'll notice that you have all sorts of options here. We got dashed and dotted and doubled and grooved and all sorts of different types of borders. I'm going to just say solid. And then I'm going to tell it what color. So we'll say white. And if I save that, you'll see that it has added a border to that picture and it's rounded the corners. So it's starting to look pretty good. Okay. Let's say we want to put a shadow on our picture. These are all just things that you can do to make it look a little more interesting. We'll put box shadow. You notice it's different. The other one was text shadow. This is box shadow. Same exact way that it works though. 0 pixels, 0 pixels. Let's put maybe we'll put a 10 pixel shadow on this one. Black. Save. And refresh. You'll see that that added a shadow there. All right. It looks good. Okay, so it's starting to come together. Ah, there's a problem. You'll notice that because we use the image tag and we put these sort of specs in there for the image tag, it also affected the logo because the logo is also an image. Well, in CSS, we can create something called classes where it only affects one part of our document. I'm going to show you how that works exactly. What we can do is we can create a class by changing this, changing what tag it's affecting. You put a period and then any sort of descriptive name. So I'm going to say image. Okay, so I put dot image or period image. This is called a class. And now if we want this effect with the rounded corners and the border and the shadow, it'll only affect things that are using the image class. Like I said, we could have put any name here. As long as it doesn't have spaces, it should work. But here's how we actually use that. Go into our index, and you can see that we only want it to affect the screenshot JPEG. So inside the HTML tag, we put class equals image. Okay, that was the class that we created, the name. So we are telling our HTML document that only this image will use the class image. The class image. And if we refresh, that'll take it off of here, and it'll keep it on here because we told it that Stranger Things is not using that class, only screenshot is. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so you can see how that will really start to make a page that looks a lot better. There's a lot more we could do with this, and I don't want to spend too much more time. I don't want to overwhelm you with new stuff in CSS. This is just meant to be an intro. Okay, let's maybe do one more thing. Let's say we wanted our text to have a background color, because right now it's still pretty hard to read. Well, here's a cool little thing that we could do. We could put background color, and we could just put a color like black and save it. And you'll see that everywhere that the P tag is used, it throws a black background behind it. But you know what? I don't like that it's right up against the edge of that, so let's put some padding. It's called padding in there. Let's say 10 pixels of padding. That's going to just add a little bit of space between the edge. Like that. You see it added a little space on the sides and on the top. But the cool thing is that we can do some really crazy stuff. It's not crazy, but nice design stuff with CSS. For example, let's say we don't want it 100% solid black. Maybe we want it transparent. Maybe we want to be able to see through the background and be able to see the background behind it. Well, what we can do is add a tag like this called an RGBA tag. That's red, green, and blue, and alpha. Alpha is transparency. So this one works a little differently. We would put the red, green, and blue values of the color and then how clear we want it to be. So let me show you what I mean. Black would be 0, 0, 0 because it has no color. And then let's put a 1 at the end for alpha. That means it's going to be, it's not going to change. If I save this and I refresh it, it's still black. But if I take that 1 and let's say I make it 0.5, which is 50%, and I save it, now that background is 50% transparent. If I go, let's go 80%, so 0.8, and save it, now it's 80% transparent, so I can see through it a little bit. You can do a lot of nice stuff with that. Could also do that with our image if we really wanted to. Could use an opacity tag. Okay, and same thing. Let's say we want that picture to be 50% or 0.5 half 50% transparent, and we save it. Now that picture will be see-through. All right, these are things you could never do with HTML. All right, HTML was super limited in what you could do, and this is only the tip of the iceberg. I'm just showing you a few things that you can put into your web design documents right away. All right, so if you got that far and it looks like this, I'll just open it in a browser so you can see how it looks. So I go to my index now, and I view it in a browser. Okay, that's what we did. You can see that it's responsive, so when I change the size, everything changes nicely, so it's going to look good on pretty much any screen. And you can see that this looks really good, and it's really not a lot of work once you know what the tags are doing. Our HTML document's really basic. It's the style CSS file that's running basically everything we see visually, all the design elements for that document. Okay, so save what you're doing, and hopefully, like I said, you got through that. Till next time, thanks for watching. See you later.